Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we are going to take a nice long spoilery look, so you have been warned. Click away if you don't want any spoilers, for the Mandalorian-Season 2, Episode 7, the last episode before the season finale, or Chapter 15, The Believer. Just like with the tragedy, my brain twitched hard when the title card flashed across the screen. There was not as much fear as when the tragedy flashed across the screen, but there was a good bit of trepidation, and I wasn't sure why. Then the show got started in earnest, and I forgot all about it till the episode was over. Now, I had a personal theory about how getting Bill Burr, or what's his name, out of the prison was going to go. However, it wasn't really based on any real clues from the show, but from how consistently wrong we have been about the timing of major events in the show as a fandom. For the Ahsoka episode, we predicted that she would be the cliffhanger at the end of the show, and she was dicing up poor unsuspecting trees from the beginning. For the Boba Fett episode, we were expecting Din to have to fight his way to Typhon through the combined challenges of the New Republic bureaucracy and the physical dangers of the inner core, and then he gets there in the first few seconds of the show. So, for the Bill Burr episode, I decided it would be best to bet with the house rather against the house. All the other reviewers were predicting that Cara Dune and Mando would have to bust Bill Burr out from the prison in a complicated heist episode, much like the one Bill Burr episode last season. Very sneaky, very illegal, and very boom boom at the end. So I said nope, and gave everything the Fiona twist. I predicted that Cara would use her legal powers to spring Bill Burr with the help of her X-Wing pilot friend who gave her the badge. That we probably wouldn't even see the spring and would jump right to Bill Burr whining about being dragged along on the ride. Well, I wasn't dead on, but my method worked as I was orders of magnitude closer than everyone else. The scene opens with Bill Burr working in a junkyard chop shop for TIE fighters. Given the series' stated ties to Thrawn, we can only assume that he and his fellow prisoners have been tasked with reclaiming the Dunium from the TIE fighters. Remember, there were hyperspace-capable TIE fighters by the end of Rebels, although we never saw one past the in-development model, what you call it, the prototype that Ezra and Sabine stole. However, given this series' stated ties to Thrawn, we can assume that these TIE fighters have at least some Dunium in them. Given how precious the metal was in the Thrawn books and how much was vaporized when the Death Star exploded, it makes sense that the New Republic would be stripping as much as possible out of the ships remaining. Then we get to see the crew in the passenger hold of the Slave One, and we get to see the hull rotating around their seating due to the unique flight patterns of the ship. So that was really cool. That's kind of been an canonical feature of the Slave One. It was really exciting to see it in live action. They arrive at the planet where Bill Burr can do his thing and discover that the Imperials are harvesting a material called Rhodonium? If you watch the show Rebels, you might recognize that as Sabine Wren's best and most explosive of old friends. And here's where the writer makes a joke through the practical and stoic lips of Boba Fett that made me nearly split my sides laughing and cheering. Our merry band of cold-blooded killers are discussing the situation, and Boba mentions that Rhodinium is a volatile material, and then pauses for half a beat, and in that half a beat I cringed as an old wound twinged. See, what I thought this was for the first half beat was a misuse of the word volatile, a misuse that bothers me and other scientists only slightly less than when people use modifiers on the adjective unique. You see, it is the nature of the word. Something is either unique or it is not unique. It is the nature of the adverbs to modify a verb or an adjective, but unique being an adjective, because of its nature, cannot be modified. Nothing is more unique, nothing is less unique, or Webster help me, nothing is very unique. However, people misuse this word all the time, and to avoid the accusation of pedantry, most chemists cringe and grind our teeth in our sleep in silence. Likewise, volatile is often misused, and that is mostly the fault of gasoline and how common and well known it and its properties are. You see, volatile has a very, very, very specific meaning. A chemical is only volatile if it evaporates quickly at standard pressure and temperature, which is 25 degrees centigrade and 1 atm, room temperature and room pressure for most of humanity on Earth, or basically a nice cool day on the beach in a garage downtown. Now, if you spill a can of gas on the floor of a garage, even if it's cool and cloudy, you will notice that it will evaporate very, very quickly compared to water. This is an example of it being volatile. Think about the shape and general design of a gas can. It is designed to prevent evaporation, and still, if you leave it out too long, you will lose gas to evaporation. Gas evaporates very quickly compared to water under normal conditions. It is, therefore, volatile. However, gas also has other qualities utterly unrelated to its volatility. Gas, being strings of carbons and hydrogens, is highly flammable and highly explosive. Now, for a common person handling gas, these three elements are very important. You don't want your gas to evaporate, burn, or explode when you are storing it. But the second two are different problems. In general, they're much easier to prevent with safety measures and storage design. Basically, all you would have to do is don't let gas build up in an enclosed space and don't bring a source of ignition like a match near them. So on a day-to-day basis, the biggest problem for storing gas, especially if you're doing it on an industrial scale, is the evaporation rate. You lose money if you let the gas evaporate. So you have to keep constantly in mind that gas is volatile. However, you can never forget for a moment that gas is also explosive and flammable. So it becomes a shorthand for volatile, explosive, and flammable. This also applies to other common fuels: diesel, propane, concentrated alcohol, and even to some extent to hydrogen peroxide. So volatile, while only ever meaning evaporates quickly at room temperature, is also used to mean explosive and flammable in common conversation. You know what other things are also volatile? Vanilla flavoring, every perfume ever, and anything that has a deliberate sense to it. Largely, this is because of a carbon ring known as a benzene ring that acts like a kite to pick up molecules and blow them away. But these things generally aren't explosive or flammable unless they have alcohol added in. Now, a scientific term is kind of anchored in the language. It doesn't drift as much as common words because it has a dedicated group of scientists keeping it in place. But the natural course of language to drift, and this anchor of scientists causes friction between the general population and scientists. So hearing your hero refer to an explosive chemical that you can't smell as volatile continues to grate on the ears of scientists and engineers, even while it's a commonly used phrase. So I almost winced when the character in The Mandalorian referred to the volatile chemical, and then there was a half beat and the character didn't stop there. It is highly volatile and explosive. And I cheered! The writer knew, the writer understood. The writer was thinking of all of us poor pedantic scientist types who die a little on the inside when the word volatile is misused. Thank you for putting these practical words in the practical mouth of Boba Fett. I hope you are rewarded with at least a minor role in the announced Rogue Squadron movie, you beautiful and articulate man. Then the show is just full of little moments where reality seeps into the fantastic in a perfect storytelling pattern just like this. Bill Burr, who in show was a sharpshooter, actually has a little trouble figuring out the controls of the transport they steal. He is clearly familiar with the type of controls, but he has to take a moment to familiarize himself with them. The scene gave me flashbacks to every single spring when my department would get our fresh fleet of trucks for work. I would ride down to the rental agency and would have to spend a few moments after I got in, noting which lever was the gear shift, which was the headlights, and most importantly, which was the presets on the radio. It was a matter of a few seconds, but this made the episode so much more real. Then there's a callback to the first season. The Mando steals the armor and weapons of the transport guards. Now, this is a backwater planet and a base that has been out of contact with fresh supplies for years now. The uniforms are dirty and patched, and the blaster that Mando steals just breaks down in mid-firefight. It makes that same dry clicking noise that the blaster the stormtroopers were practicing with when they killed Things fall apart when the Empire fails, and this was a perfect example of that. Bill Burr's stolen uniform stinks, and the gloves are sweaty. The helmet doesn't fit, and he can't see out of it. It shows a real attention to detail, and it kind of answers a question I had earlier in the season. All of the ships under Moff Gideon's direct command were oddly shiny on the inside. There was no scuffing on the walls. Everything was pristine. Not so this base. From the interior to the exterior, it really sets off the difference between how the elite of the Empire live versus how the rank and file survive. Even the officers' cafeteria is battered and grimy. Even the supposed hero of the Empire, the officer who dutifully followed the orders of the Empire after his death to perform horrors, even that true believer of the cause is trapped away in this trash heap of a lost corner of the Empire. Now, as usual, there are a bundle of cultural references in this show. The situation the heroes are in is a mirror image of Keanu Reeves' speed. They can't go over a certain speed or they will explode. There is the classic Western scene of the battle on the train top, complete with our hero ducking down to avoid being taken off by a low-hanging tunnel. There's There's a scene where they have to clear the path in front of the Juggernaut, and in a callback to the trucking movies of the 70s and 80s, Bill Burr reaches up to the ceiling and pulls the trigger for the air horn. And while people are talking about the fantastic sound of the seismic charge that Boba dropped, this was the sound that really hit my nostalgia button. You see, I have been a little child on the edge of a road while the big trucks rolled past. We would eagerly pump our little fists in the air to get the big rig drivers to blast their air horns. This was a very fond childhood memory for me. But here it is twisted. The children here glare listlessly up at the truckers rolling through. It was a brilliant bit of writing and directing. Then we learned that Mando, due to his ignorance or willful blindness, is an unreliable narrator. I will go into this more in its own video, but this is supposed to be a running theme of the series and a moment unique to the episode so far. Mando has to deal with a lot of ignorance caused by his strict upbringing. The long and short of it is that he calls the Bayou redneck fanboat writing types pirates. But pirates are by definition thieves. They are organized and go after moving targets like these people do, but yes, they are at heart thieves. They want what is in the cargo holds strictly for its monetary value. These well-armed rednecks come to destroy completely and not to steal. They are not pirates. They might be insurgents, or you might even call them terrorists, but they're not pirates. Moreover, the show wanted us to know that Mando was wrong. There was no need for him to call them pirates. He could have just called them trouble. So I think this will be relevant to either next episode or next season. Mando's unreliable narrator status. Then, our heroes are in the Imperial base. There's a fascinating moment where the music swells after they are rescued by the TIE fighters. Bill Burr comments on how odd it feels to be rescued by the Empire. At first, this just feels like another of his digs at Mando, but then it is revealed that he has a grudge against the Empire, and specifically a rescue or lack of rescues from the Empire himself. Then comes another what I call the football scenes. There are these little moments that the fandom has been waiting for all season, or sometimes decades. Seeing Pedro's face for the first time, Ahsoka's appearance, answers to the questions of lore that had been fiercely debated for months, if not years. Now, instead of giving these revelations the emotional weight that the fans are expecting, the creators are only giving them the emotional weight that works best for the story. Everything else is subsumed to the needs of storytelling. Ahsoka is revealed with exactly the pomp and splendor that any character who is a ghost in the night needs. Baby Yoda's true name is revealed, and then the story moves on quickly. Why Mando can't remove his helmet is revealed, and then he has to play pirate to get the information he needs. So they don't dwell on these things that have such huge emotional impact to the fans because they don't have huge emotional impacts to the characters and the stories. This is just like the ball being passed in football. It's an important and exciting part of the game, but is only one part, and then the game with the show must go on or it ceases to be what it is. The fans can discuss and dissect the moment as much as they want later, but in the moment, in the story, it only gets as much emotional gravitas and energy and time as it needs to make a good story. And that is how the show treats Mando finally breaking his code and taking off his helmet. For Mando, this is a culmination of an interpersonal battle that has lasted for 2 seasons. It's the natural event that reaches when the fandom has been waiting since chapter 1, and yet in the moment it is just one beat sandwiched in between far more intense emotional scenes. Scenes with more flash, more bang. The story didn't call for this to be a big moment, so the story didn't didn't try to make it a big moment. And yet it doesn't feel like a letdown. It just wasn't emotionally highlighted. Instead, the story moves on to the consequences of the actions. How vulnerable Mando feels with his helmet off. His subtle acting, the look on his face of nakedness was perfect and beautiful. Hats off to Pedro. I have never seen a fully clothed human being look so utterly naked and uncomfortable. Hats off to Bill Burr as well. I fully believed him as a soldier breaking down from PTSD with his need for vengeance bubbling up through his mad eyes. Of course, the review wouldn't be complete until I noted how awesome the few moments with Cara and Finnick were. At the risk of sounding shallow, I really liked how their hair was braided. Now, as someone with long hair, I can tell you that those sideway braids are both practical and hard to do. They are practical because they help control your hair while giving you a slightly more put-together look than just a common braid or ponytail. They are both graceful and professional. They are a good way for a professional person with long hair to present themselves. When we first see these women, they are both working alone, on the run and answering to no one but themselves. Kara was downright scruffy, and while Finnick was more put together, she kept her hair back in a ponytail. They obviously didn't care about their appearance. However, now there's a difference. Finnick has someone to take care of now in Boba, someone to serve. She's a Ronin who's finally found her master. She's therefore presenting herself in a shiny, more professional way. Like in the same way Boba cleaned up his armor, something he hadn't done before he fell into the Sarlacc pit. Both Boba and Finnick are Ronin who have found someone to serve, and they are trying to be better members of society. It is said that dressing neatly and well is the most artistic form of politeness. They are trying to be visually polite. Likewise, Cara Dune now has a badge to represent. Her uniform is neater, cleaner, and she too has chosen the practical sideways braids that keep her long hair professional and tidy. She's trying to be visually polite to match her new sense of responsibility. It was just a nice little touch representing the changes that are going on in the galaxy as it claws its ways out of chaos through this little personal element in these two women. Then there was the underlying currents of competent and friendly competition between them. Every moment they were on screen together, they were fiercely competing in their newly chosen skill set, which happened to be cooperative, respectable member of my chosen society. This made the competition as subtle as it was fierce. It was like those scenes in period dramas where two court people are trying to be the most polite and useful. Then comes the moment at the end where the show sacrifices all practicality for the rule of cool, as Mando bookends the season by repeating Moff Gideon's speech to him in an open challenge that throws away all tactical advantage he had. It was as if the show was so stressed from restraining itself in all the practical little moments that it had to throw caution to the wind and let the awesome rule. So, what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Were Cara and Finnick competing for the pride of most useful member of society? Did you see the mirror image of Speed in the Juggernaut's run? Did you see the mirror image of Kuno Reeves in Bill Burr's face? Leave a like below if you agree, and leave a comment blasting my analysis like a speeding load of MacGuffadonium if you disagree. Check out the links below for information on how to buy a signed copy of my books. Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, or you might want to break your heart with my book Dying Embers, or consider becoming a subscriber or a patron so I can keep pumping out the content. Peace out, my wonderful viewers.